welcome to Inform New Hampshire. My name is Dean, and this is Richie to my right, and we have our guest here, Pat, today. And we are called Inform New Hampshire. We have a YouTube channel, Inform New Hampshire, and we also have a Facebook group called Inform New Hampshire. We are very concerned with the direction of our country, and we thought we would bring you some news and information and commentary that you won't find in the mainstream media. There's a lot of hidden history here in the U.S., and there's a lot of covert operations going on to control you, to mind control you, and to dumb you down, and to keep you docile. And there's a big, long history of patterns for doing the same thing. So history tends to repeat itself, especially when you don't know your history. So first, let's just have a quick word about Jerry DeLamus, good friend of ours. Richie?
Yes, I'm going to ask people to continue to pray for Jerry DeLamus and his wife, Sue. And also find it in your heart to continue to contribute to him, his legal defense. And if you want to do that, you can go to freejerrydelemus.com and contribute whatever you can. I know him and Sue would appreciate it. Jerry's been moved to Fort Devens, so he's a lot closer for Susan to visit, and anybody else that wants to visit him for that matter. Maybe you should get in touch with Susan to find out what the requirements are, because I know she posted it once, but I don't recall everything that was there. I apologize for that. Anyway, they got a long road to hoe. 87 months he got sentenced to. And what was the other guy's name? Greg Burleson got 68 years. And nobody was injured. No money was ever stolen, no damage and anything. So it's bizarre.
So no crime committed, is that what you're saying?
Well, the government, yeah, you can't talk about your government. They work for you, but you can't criticize them. So it's just bizarre. I can't even believe it anymore. But anyway, if you can contribute to them, I know that they'd appreciate it. So thank you. So we're going to keep on asking.
So just a quick note, Richie and I are state coordinators for National Liberty Alliance. And the National Liberty Alliance is a grassroots organization committed to reinstalling or restoring the common law and common law grand juries across the country in all 3,122? I never remember that.
3,133.
3,133 counties across the country. And the common law grand jury is sort of a separate but fourth branch of government for we the people to, it's a tool, it's a power that we've had throughout history long before the Constitution of the United States. But it is based in all the way back to the Magna Carta, and it's a tool for us to keep our government employees in check. It's also a tool for us to just investigate crime, and to also create law and create statutes by virtue of a grand jury or a petite jury trial. So that was stolen from us more recently than you might think, but I think 1946 part of it. Yeah.
46.
46. In the war, everybody was doing a rah 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 VE Day and
not paying
VG
attention.
Day.
Yeah.
Exuberant. The war was over. So timing is everything, as they say.
Yeah.
Can I say something in that regard?
Please do. Yeah.
This just came out yesterday. It's why I totally forgot about it. The Unified United States Common Law Grand Jury, which is comprised of all 50 states, is contemplating, and I believe it's going to happen, filing an indictment against the people responsible for killing Lavoy Finicum. That should be served in U.S. District Court soon. I can't give you a date because I don't know the date, but it should be done soon, and everybody in America should know this. The common law grand jury, their primary function is to root out corruption in government, and they act as the fourth branch of government. Okay, only they're not part of the three branches of government. They're separate and distinct. It belongs to the people. And just very quickly, read United States versus Williams, a 1992 case, Section A of that decision. Really, it's probably the most important case law I've ever read, or opinion in the Supreme Court I've ever read. It's as if Justice Scalia was throwing the American people a life jacket. And if you don't read it, then whatever happens to us, I guess we deserve. So please familiarize yourself with it. You can Google it. You don't have to go to a law library. And you don't have to deal with the legalese. Just read Section A of that decision. It's very clear. And you'll be a little bit perturbed, but you'll be happy to hear it, too.
Yep. So where do we want to start today? We've got a lot of stuff
We have a lot of
happening.
stuff on the docket.
Oh,
that's
yeah,
for
we
sure.
do.
Being bombarded with information. We're being bombarded with criminality.
Yeah, we
It's
have.
overwhelming.
You know, Richie and I were just watching a video here prior to the show starting, and it was a video of some of the
The madness in Boston.
madness.
That's what it's titled, yeah.
The video is called "The Madness in Boston," and we're not going to show it to you because it's just got too much foul language. But
Yeah.
there was a young guy that was just amongst the, I don't know what to call them,
They were protesters.
the progressives. Yeah, he was with the protester side of the free speech rally, and he was just wanting to engage them in conversation about why they're there, why he should join their movement, that sort of thing. And they just berated him, and they just twisted his words and attacked him, and they eventually started attacking him physically. The police had to remove him to keep
If
him
they
safe.
had a rope pat, they would have hung him. Mob mentality took
Well,
over. It was just
the
bizarre.
left. That's the left. The left's been the same.
It was hysteria.
The left's been the same since the French Revolution. When we talked about that, the Committee of Public Safety, the Paris Commune, these crowds, the filthy language, sexual innuendo, desecration of monuments, all the way up through its history. You follow that through the 19th century, through the Russian Revolution. You come to the high point of leftist idealism, which is the Spanish Civil War, 1936 to 39, where all of a sudden people like George Orwell are involved in that, and they say all these things we've believed in for so long, we have a bird's eye view of actually what's going on here, and it's quite horrific.
Yep.
Specifically, I'm talking about the desecration of graves, both our veterans and also Civil War veterans. You saw they tried to dig up Nathan Bedford's forest grave. I think back to the Spanish Civil War, 36 to 39. That was a common thing on the communist side to dig up the graves of Catholic nuns and priests in Spain and drag the bodies out into the street and put them into all sorts of really horrible
Poses, yeah.
etc. So there's a real demonic element to that. And you can see that with these rallies, with the vile language and everything in front of children. It's just, they really are a force to be reckoned with. And,
We didn't talk about this, Pat, but I want to say something to everybody out there. And I want to caution everybody about this too, but I want to say it. Yesterday I got a video from somebody, seemed to be pretty reliable. It's from the AmericanBrand.org. You can check it out. It's a group out of Montana. I haven't had the chance to check him out, but the individual sounded very, very serious. And what he said was him, or the group he's with, is declaring war on the progressives. And I'm not talking about guns or bombs, so let's clear that up right away. It's a peaceful and a lawful way of doing this, and they're soliciting volunteers from all over the country to fight this fight. One of the things that hit me is that what he was saying was very, very true. All this stuff that's going on is just aimed at the destruction of our country. They want to take down these statues. Look, I don't care what somebody did 200 years ago. It's history. You can't go back and change it. Whatever it is, learn from it, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm mentioning this group because if they are legitimate and people want to look into it out there, I haven't done it yet, so don't go off. It could be Hillbilly Clinton out there waiting, sitting at the computer, waiting to take names so they can search you out. I don't know. But if it's legitimate, I'll be one of the first to sign up for it because I am going to fight for my country peacefully and lawfully. But ultimately, anyway, I have to save this country because the freedom and the liberty of the world is contingent upon whether we survive or we fall. So I wanted to mention that anyway. Thank you.
So the address is theamericanbrand.org.
TheAmericanBrand.org, yes. They're out of Montana.
The problem that you have is they have distorted history so much within the educational institutions that generationally you've produced these batches of miscreants.
Well, we
and,
saw that
mi-
here on this
Like
video.
that, yeah.
Misanthropes of the first magnitude. They have no knowledge of history at all. And the left has done that, and they've done it successfully since at least the 60s. They've done it with the history of this country. They've done it with the history of other countries. I can remember being a student of Russian history, how things changed in the 60s, where all of a sudden the thrust was in that whole Russian Revolution that it had been a popular uprising, and they asked Lenin to please lead the people, and that became that was supposedly the train of thought you were supposed to take in the major academy if you were going to be sent on to Russia and your resume expanded. And then those that really told the truth about what had happened in the country, like Richard Pipes and Robert Conquest, are treated as pariahs. Well, they did the same thing with the history of the American Civil War with Lincoln, and Lincoln being the great statesman and humanitarian and really caring for black people, etc. And if you study the actual history of it, it's if you pull up Thomas D. Lorenzo's The Real Lincoln, you say, wait a minute, what am I really looking at here? Can this be true? But they need that to keep on justifying the growth of massive central government.
Well, let me ask you, Pat, because I wish I had your knowledge of history, but it seems as if the government is shining a spotlight on someone like Lincoln, but up on a pedestal like this man is great.
Right.
Don't look there.
Right.
And then for the guys that they want to, tear apart and tear down, they say, okay, here's the guy you want to look at, and they'll discredit the hell out of him, when in reality, he's the good guy and he's the bad guy.
We have to know a lot about the history of it. If you look at the history of England, you look at a history of horrific corruption, and you look at the reason people came to this country, a great many of them came because there was no chance because of the corruption. And then get into the American Revolution, where we separate from Britain, and we have our first Constitution, and you have an episode where you have Alexander Hamilton together with John Quincy Adams, and Adams is talking about the greatness of the British governmental system, how it's the best in the world if only you could rid it of all of the corruption. And Hamilton will say, oh no, that's where you're wrong. It's the corruption that actually makes it work. So you had somebody like Hamilton who is in favor of a strongly centralized system where he will put his friends, elites on the eastern coast, into positions of power. And you look at his ideas for the way the country should be structured, and he's calling for a president that's in for life, a president that appoints all of the governors.
A king, yeah.
Virtually a king.
Yeah.
So you've always had this. And what you have is that whole Hamiltonian concept, it's carried on all the way up to Lincoln. And it eventually goes from Hamilton to a guy named Henry Clay, who develops this thing called the American system. And what it is they're looking for government largesse. They want a national bank so that fiat money is readily available for their projects, canal building with their friends, factory building, all these things, and especially the railways. It becomes a driving element in that Whig Party all the way up until its collapse. And Lincoln, as a friend of Clay's and as a student of Clay's, will take on his mantle, and he's totally, absolutely dedicated to that system, no matter what it does. So by the time that Civil War starts, Lincoln already has his agenda in mind. He's worked for it for over 30 years, and that is to totally change the nature of the country and to build a strong, centralized state where you have all of that money readily available, and where things are concentrated in particular, friends and individuals and corporate entities. In other words, corporate welfare.
Yep,
It's really where it starts, is at that point. And this idea that he cared, was a humanitarian and cared about black people, I think it's utterly absurd on the face of it. I don't see anything to indicate. He never mentioned anything about really black people until 1857.
It's amazing they can pull that off when Lincoln, in one of his inaugural addresses, actually said that he wanted to get rid of black people and ship them back to Africa.
In his first inaugural address, the thing that Lincoln said that's really stunning is that he will not touch slavery. He said that he will use all full force necessary in terms of taxation, and he's talking about the tariff. So what he's talking about is protecting the northern interests, sectional industrial interests that have put him into power, and that's the thing that's really stunning about some of his speeches when you watch that. So you could see in the South where you have this strong feeling against the tariff, where they feel as though a lot of them feel as though they live in a state of semi-poverty because of the exorbitant tariff rates. What you find is your tariffs will start to go lower after the 1830s, and you get to a point around the 1850s, and suddenly, as it's sure that Lincoln's going to come into power, you'll have a thing called the moral tariff is developed in early 1860, because you have people in industry that are sure he's going to get in, and it's going to be a 47% tax. So any product coming in, say, from France, if it's furniture, if it lands at one of those ports, say, so Charleston, it's going to be 47% on top. So now anybody that buying it in the marketplace, it's going to be higher. Of course, French businessman has lost money, and then almost all of that has gone into the north to be spent on their projects. So the south is, they're probably a third of the population. They're paying 80 to 85% of the tax, and almost all of it is spent in the north for corporate welfare. So, I mean, wouldn't you think somebody would be upset?
Yeah.
I'd be upset.
Yeah.
Well, I think they were back then,
They were.
to an extent. But look at today. Look at what, the thing that gets me today is that you try to tell people, I've got papers here that I leave all over the city, and it basically says our ignorance is to blame. And it's about the statutes and the codes that our legislature makes. We all think that they're applicable to us, and they're not. But we believe that. I mean, the law, you look at Article 5 in Part 2 of the Constitution, it clearly says it's for the running of the government. It's not for me and you. We're private people, Dean. We're private. Everyone that you people listen, if you're a government employee or a bureaucrat, those statutes apply to you. They don't apply to the general public. But the cops enforce them, then the courts enforce them, and the lawyers enforce them, and the legislature's so dense, pardon my French, but they are, they keep making these, well, we need to do this to help you, we need to do that to help you, and like dummies, we all say, oh, okay,
Or to fix you.
we just take it. And the statutes and codes are so many, and I don't know if you have a number, either one of you guys, but I'm talking thousands between the state and the federal government, thousands upon thousands. We get buried in this, and we don't even know what the law is anymore. But they're trying to bury the constitutions, which are the law.
Oh, they buried it for a long time. And
Yeah.
they manipulate history. It's the same thing with the Roosevelts. And you guys can do a program on them sometime, and it would be great. Because you find a continuation of the same thing. You know, Lincoln achieved a consolidated state the same way that Bismarck in Germany was doing the same thing at the same time, and ironically, through the use of railways and a series of small-scale short wars. And then what you'll find is, after the Civil War, because you had so many people that were attuned to the constitutional history and state rights, they were able to slow things down. But then once again, once you get to the turn of the century with the Federal Reserve, and then FDR in particular, then it takes off. The growth of government hasn't ceased since then. You know, it's a monstrosity. And you look at it now, certainly, you know, we get people in that we want in, and we want things done, and we find out it's just like Obamacare. We've listened for 8 years. We're going to rip it right out when we get our people in there, and we're going to destroy it. And it's the worst thing. Now they're in there, and what's happening? What's wrong with Obamacare?
Well,
We don't have anybody, you know.
Can you critique this, Pat? I'm going to ask you a question and see if you know.
It's like,
Germany took itself, from my understanding of history, they took itself and pulled themselves up by the bootstraps, got rid of the central bank, started their own, and became an industrial nation, very strong industrial nation. That's one of the reasons, if not the main reason, why the war started. It's my understanding.
yeah.
Is because the central banks, they threw them the hell out. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because I really need, you're the historian.
That's a long story, and we probably would save that for another time period. But certainly, you're on the right track, and you get into the idea of central banks. You notice that the few countries don't have them are the ones recently that have been invaded.
Yeah.
Yep.
All of them. You know,
We know
Libya,
that.
Syria, you know, Iraq,
Yeah.
all of
Talked
that
about
right
that.
across the board. So.
They want, that's where they want, North Korea. And
Yeah, there's always influences.
Iran.
There's always influences behind the scenes that pull the strings. You know, it's like I say, all these economic drivers in that whole period leading up to the American Civil War, where these people they're living off of all this government largesse. It's a whole system, and they want to expand it. They're looking to create a massive system of government patronage. And what they were doing was they were taking the British mercantile system and imposing it on this nation right here. And then later on, by the time we're kids, you look at a lot of these historians and they say, well, Lincoln really built the nation and he was a super capitalist. And the fact of the matter is they were practicing mercantilism, and it's anything but capitalism, which is really an association of people that want to trade freely. They were literally holding a gun to people's heads in terms of the South, like I say in that inauguration speech, where I'll use physical force to collect taxation, because that's the only real source of money, because there is no income tax.
Yeah.
Is going to be
What would
that
you
tariff.
What would you say is on the where do we land on the spectrum in current time from socialism, communism, along towards capitalism? Because everybody talks about the United States being a capitalist society, which I just don't believe at all. Most of my money, the earnings go to taxes. We're very much socialist.
Well, when you have, if you were totally communized and the means of production is controlled by the state, so you're not
Right.
totally communized, not
Right.
totally socialized.
It's
Because
more-
you have a lot of private industry. The problem we have a lot of public-private partnerships. You look at particular corporations, this is just like the period where I'm talking about with Lincoln.
And that's fascism, right?
Well, yeah, you could
I
be.
think it's beyond fascism.
You could call it that. You take, for instance, General Electric Corporation, right before the first election, when Obama got in, and they bought, what was it, MSNBC? They bought one of the major studios and then pushed him, and the next thing you know, all of these contracts for solar went to them, and then they shipped it overseas to China. So it's a public-private type of partnership, and it doesn't work out well for us. It's not really. It's a form of corruption. It's a form of fascism. You could say it's not pure capitalism in a sense that everybody's free to trade in an open marketplace and everything's based on competition, and the customer actually wins out in the long run because there's so many people competing for his favor. So,
Well, in my humble opinion, the greatest hope for the return of capitalism, and I'm going to say this, is cryptocurrencies. And what we're finding right now is there's an explosion of the use of the technology that makes the cryptocurrencies private and separate from government and uncontrollable by government. So what it does is it allows people to conduct, and this is really important for corporate America, corporations all over the world, and they are adopting the crypto technology, which is the underlying, I forget the term for it, but the setup is such that they can, for instance, when a corporation wants to do business with another company and they want to send over their proposal in writing, that's vulnerable when they do that over the internet or anywhere else. It can be hijacked. It can be and we're talking about corporate secrets, corporate trade secrets, corporate financial secrets, technology secrets. All those things are always vulnerable when they're working around the world and doing different stuff or around the country. But if you have this crypto technology, you can actually do that type of transacting or communications unabated by anyone, and it's being adopted now all over the world. It's not being talked about much. The adoption rate in the U.S. is still below 1% of cryptocurrencies. However, it literally is skyrocketing. There was roughly 700 cryptocurrencies in the marketplace 2 months ago. Now I think it's up close to 800 because there's a lot of ICOs coming online. A lot of these will be useless and will be just people trying to, there'll be a lot of riffraff. Remember the dot-com boom? There was just a ton of money going into the dot-com boom, and a lot of shakeout happened in the end, and a lot of them disappeared. That's the same thing that's going to happen with cryptos. But in the end, we're going to have a new way to trade for you and I without being siphoned off our assets from the government. Yeah,
I want to know, can we do counterpoint?
absolutely. Yeah,
Good.
Go ahead.
No, I gotta.
oh, God.
I mean, no, I won't say I went along, but I listened to the cryptocurrency, and my philosophy is simply this: anything you do that detracts from currency in general, cash,
Right.
is a detriment to all of us, and I'll tell you why. I can take a dollar bill and I can go any place I want to spend it, and the government doesn't know about it. Now, I know you said that the government doesn't know about this. What we don't know is that the government is behind this. We don't know who's involved with this thing.
Right.
And if you think that the international banking community isn't on top of this,
Oh, yeah.
I think you're mistaken.
Well,
Dean.
okay,
But-
good.
but
Good
hold
point.
on, hold
Really
on.
good point.
If you have cash, you can go, if they say, okay, let's get rid of this guy, John Q. Smith, you can take your cash and go buy food. But if you're into this cryptocurrency or plastic, it really doesn't matter.
Right.
And they remove you from the computer, you're going, the plastic's no good. I can't buy food. I can't eat.
Yep.
I can't pay my rent. I can't do anything with it. So where do you go?
You bring up some good points, but here's the thing about the governments and the banking system. Banking is government, basically. They are, when you see cryptocurrencies start coming out that are said to be tied to gold. So in other words, they're creating a gold standard for their cryptocurrency. They're doing that. That first of all, that will start the demise of the dollar going away, and they're doing that to because they can't control Bitcoin. They can't infiltrate it or take it over or anything. So they're going to create their own system to try to lure people into their system, which they can control. And that's what you got to watch for. You know, they'll make it sound pretty and
Just one other point,
desirable.
and Pat, you're welcome to weigh in on this, but the United States Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, says gold and silver will be used for, to pay your debts or whatnot.
Yep.
So the currency that we have now is unconstitutional, it's unlawful.
Right.
Right.
It's been unlawful for over 100 years.
Right.
Why would we want to switch to something that's unlawful without changing it? Cryptocurrency is
Right.
unlawful.
Well, it's not unlawful because it's not being issued by the government. It is simply
It's unlawful.
no, it's not. If
It violates this law, Dean.
no,
It's
if
really-
if I decide to
Barter?
to barter with you and do some work for you, and you're going to give me some food, then how's that unlawful?
Well, that's not the case.
Yeah.
You're
I'm just
you're
asking.
talking about millions of people.
Yeah.
If you want to do it with me, yeah, I could say, hey, you want a bag of, we got farms. You want a bag of manure? I need a pig or a
So the
cow or
only
something.
lawful
Chickens.
currency for the government is the gold and silver. I agree with that.
Yeah,
Cryptocurrency is not a government-sanctioned currency, and it never will be, hopefully. So it's a way for you and I to create a market between ourselves, free market, unabated by government, and it will allow us to transact and trade with each other all over the planet. Does that start to it starts to remove government? I'm
Yeah.
telling you guys, this is going to be the most phenomenal thing in our future, and much of the questions that we have now are going to be answered over time. There will be a lot of riffraff. There's a lot of scams going on already, but the fact is it's working, and it's
Yeah.
got a viable future.
it's going to take a lot to sell me, but
Yep, and I appreciate
I got
it.
an open mind.
I want you to keep asking me those questions, because next week I'll come back with some better answers. So.
Well, I think Trump is aware of what's going on. I mean, naturally, financially, he's a very, very sharp guy. He's a lot smarter than most people realize. That's for sure. He's 100 steps ahead of most people. But I think he understands the problem with banking and international banking and how it's been for so long.
Yep.
And all the central banks and the petrodollar and all of that. And he knows as a system, it's not going to last. They knew it wasn't going to last with fiat currency. That's why they went to carbon trading to control every single piece of soil on the earth and people. That was going to be the new system. And get the younger people to the point where they buy into this guaranteed income,
Guaranteed income, yeah.
which is, you think about it, it's just insane. It's, I'm going to guarantee you a paycheck every week for doing nothing, because there isn't a lot going on. But don't worry about everything. You're going to be happy. It's like, my goodness,
I want the government out of my life, not in it.
Well, we all feel that way.
Yeah.
That's what this whole deal was with this Civil War. I say with a lot of the South, people looking back then said, this whole thing is changing now, where we feel like there's an interference at all levels, and this march is going to get out of hand. And you can see that at the end of that war, where General Patrick Claiborne will say that no one's ever going to know what the truth of all the events were, because these schools are going to carry on a narrative that's going to be the same for the whole nation from here on in. So,
Want to take a stab at some judges in California?
In California?
Well, it's an agency. State agency that disciplines judges fights
Yeah.
fights to keep operating in secrecy after 56 years. A California Judicial Commission that's operated in secrecy more than 5.5 decades is engaged in a legal battle to thwart an audit ordered by the state legislators, and Judicial Watch has filed a court brief supporting the long overdue probe in the name of transparency. A court hearing has been scheduled three times and shuffled around to different judges, with the latest being in late August before Judge Suzanne Bolanis in San Francisco Supreme Court. The case sheds much needed light on the unbelievable history of taxpayer-funded agency that's conducted its business in private and with no oversight for 56 years, even through protecting the public even though protecting the public is among its key duties. The agency is known as Commission on Judicial Performance, CJP, Commission on Judicial Performance, and it's charged with enforcing rigorous standards on judicial conduct and disciplining judges in the nation's largest court system. California court system serves over 37 million people and has more than double the judges of the federal judicial system. So in California, there are 1,882 judges, whereas the federal judicial system has 840. I thought that's gone up.
I gotta weigh in on this.
All right,
I
go
have
ahead.
to. All right? I want to just say, regardless of whoever these clowns are, and they are clowns, okay, all of them, because they're looking for a paycheck off of we the people, the United States Constitution and your state constitution, I got them both there. I blew this one up. Anyway, they have mechanisms in place. It's called the common law grand jury, okay, that roots out corruption in government. A grand jury sits, and if you got a bad lawyer, a bad judge, a bad politician, a bad bureaucrat, it really doesn't matter. If the common law grand jury indicts that person, he goes to trial. Nothing can stop that indictment. The problem is we don't have common law grand juries, especially here in New Hampshire. Article 72A and 73A took them away from us unlawfully. They violated the passage of those two articles are repugnant and contrary to the Constitution. It's against the law. They can't do it. We're making an attempt to do that. The reason I even jump on this thing, please read U.S. versus Williams, 1992 case. Justice Scalia did not the dissenting opinion, I'm sorry, wrote the opinion on it. And it's read Section A of the decision. It's very, very enlightening. You'll be pleased and you'll be fighting with us to get this thing done. The people, according to Article 7, the 7th Amendment of the Constitution, it says no fact tried by a jury, petite or grand, it doesn't matter which, shall be otherwise re-examined in any court in the United States. That includes the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. The common law grand jury, which is a court of record, okay, or part of the court of record, I should say, has the ultimate authority because we, the people, wrote the law, the Constitution, for the government to obey. This garbage that the CJP, whatever it's called, is just that. Another way for lawyers and judges to make money. And it's about time lawyers and judges stood up and says, hey, we got to stop this garbage of making money and taking this country to its knees, because that's what you're doing, guys. Mm-hmm. Not all of you are bad out there, I'm not saying that. But the ones that are good, you got to start fighting for this.
Yep.
Our country's worth fighting for. So I had to jump on that thing.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Let me
ahead.
just finish this little bit of this article, which was instead the commission has dismissed 90% of all complaints about judges in the past decade, according to figures published by a California newspaper. Only 3.4% ended in disciplinary action, and less than 1% led to public censure. None of the decisions were transparent, the news story reveals, and critics have demanded accountability for CJP for years, asserting that the commission gives biased and inept judges a pass. In its 2016 annual report, CJP discloses that 1,079 of the 1,210 complaints it received were dismissed after initial review. Discipline was issued in only 45 cases, with more than half of the offenders receiving an advisory letter. So disciplinary action is receiving an advisory
they're
letter.
earning their paycheck.
Yeah.
11 others received private admonishment, privately being admonished. And then 6 got public admonishment,
What a joke.
so publicly they were admonished. And then 8 got public discipline, and I don't even know what that means. Only 1 judge was removed from office, and another received public censure. Offenses included on-bench abuse of authority, administrative malfeasance, bias or appearance of bias, and improper political activities. So yeah, these guys are, the Fox is protecting the henhouse. No, something, I got that wrong.
Now, there was a judge just recently got 28 years, and he was in charge of, it was a juvenile court, but he put some 5,000 kids into prison, he and one other judge. And they were put into these prisons that are they're privately owned, So I guess he was being paid. I think it was
Warehoused.
over $1 million
I saw that.
because they had to work and they produced something, but he was being paid by those prisons.
Yep.
And it took almost, I think, $1 million, and he got 28 years.
So he was getting a kickback to put
That's right.
innocent children into a
Corporate
prison.
prisons don't make money unless they have the count up. The count's got to be high in order for them to make money.
Make
Yeah,
a
yeah,
profit.
It's such a disgrace that people don't say something. One other point I wanted to make to people listening. It's long past due for you people who watch this show. Send it to the people in your family and your group of friends who think you wear a tinfoil hat or whatever. This country is going to go down the toilet, and we got to wake people up. This isn't about Democrat, Republican, liberal, and conservative. This is about the government. The corrupt people in our government are stealing from us our Constitution and our rights. Do you want to do something about it, or do you want to sit there like a little girl and say, oh, you did this and you did that, and we fight back and forth because you didn't do anything to me and I didn't do anything to you? Your government's doing it to you. It's time to wake up, people. Share this video, please. I mean, I don't know what I have to do, but I'm begging you.
You want to
okay?
be run by Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the like? That's what
boy.
you got. That's what
Harry
you got
Reid,
going on.
Who drove 50 ranches out of Nevada so he could sell land to the Chinese for solar panel plants, whatever the hell it is.
Mhm.
Anyway, I mean that sincerely. Send this video to him. We're not professional news people or something, but for nothing else, U.S. versus Williams, Section A. You got to read it.
Henry Clay, Harry Reid. Henry Clay, Harry Reid. What's the difference?
None.
Same thing's going on back here is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And you have all of these myths that support big government. And it's like I said, when we first started this, they were ripping apart all these graveyards now and knocking down statuary. And it's a war on the historical memory, but that whole memory has been distorted. And one of the biggest parts of that is that Lincoln was a humanitarian, and the North was more humanitarian. I said, like, are you serious? You had black codes in the North before you did in the South.
Yeah.
And if you pick up Alexis de Tocqueville, Democracy on America, all right, who was a type of proto-sociologist, he looks at the United States and he says, you know what I find? He says a greater degree of prejudice is in the North, actually. You know, especially when you deal with some of these folks they called Yankees. That's not everybody north of the Mason-Dixon line, but there's a peculiar type that's kind of self-righteous and domineering and greedy and nasty. And if you look at the abolitionists, you find a ton of them are like that. They're not what people think that they were. That whole time period it merits a lot more examination. If somebody just produced a book recently and they were talking about abolitionists and the Puritan strain, what they were really like,
Yeah.
and where you have these people that are so self-righteous and they're never wrong, but they have a big appetite for things, and I said the ideal comparison would be Hillary Clinton would be wonderful.
So you mentioned Debbie Wasserman Schultz. You want a little quick
Yeah.
update there?
Drunken sailor's worst awakening nightmare, right?
Oh, God. Oh, so Debbie Wasserman Schultz, disgraced with being dismissed from the Democratic National Committee on the primary day for colluding with Hillary to destroy Bernie Sanders' chances for winning the primary to be president. She also was a representative, a federal representative for the state of Florida, or a county, or a place down there in Florida. But she's been caught with this A1 brother deal. These guys have been around 10 years, siphoning money off of the congressional payroll budget and sending money to their friends and family, pretending having ghost workers in their family that weren't really working. But anyway, the latest update, and well, let me just read this. A1 plot thickens as New York Democrat Yvette Clarke quietly wrote off $120,000 of missing technology equipment. When we reported last week that Imran Awan and his wife had been indicted by a grand jury for 4 counts, including bank fraud and making false statements related to some home equity loans, we also noted that those charges could simply be placeholders for further developments yet to come. Now, according to a new report from the Daily Caller, the more interesting component of the FBI's investigation could be tied to precisely why New York Democratic Representative Yvette Clarke quietly agreed early in 2016 to simply write off $120,000 in missing electronics tied to the Awan brothers. The chief of staff from the Democratic representative, Yvette Clark, quietly agreed in early 2016 to sign away $120,000 in missing electronics, sign away that problem on behalf of two former IT aides now suspected of stealing equipment from Congress, the Daily Caller found out. So Clark's chief of staff dismissed the loss and prevented it from coming up in future audits by signing a form removing the missing equipment from a house-wide tracking system. So in other words, she colluded to remove it so that it wouldn't be audited because they just happened to lose $120,000 worth of equipment, which is 10% of their budget for the
That
year.
$120,000 is our money. You should be mad at it, not because a Democrat, a Republican, a liberal, a conservative, but because it's your money and some politician is wasting it. These three nitwits, the Ewan brothers, Earwax, Nose Drop, and Eye Dip, or whatever his frickin' name is. Yeah. I'm sorry, but I get so pissed. They're paying these people $160,000 to steal from us, which is what they did.
That's exactly right.
And the money that they took for a paycheck, they stole from us. And you want to sit there and blame Democrats or Republicans? I could care less who it is. That's my money. That's my grandchildren's money. That's my children's money. We should all feel that way. The corruption in government's got to stop, and you got to stop it. You can't keep pointing fingers. This garbage that we saw here, the madness in Boston with the free speech rally. These people, we become so intolerant of one another's opinions. These people were ready to kill this guy. All he wanted to do was talk to him.
Yeah.
Simply talk. The point I want to make with this is, your opinion isn't the law. We have to live with it. If we're not a lawful society, then we're a lawless society, and this is what we get. Your opinion is exactly that, your opinion. This is the law. You have the right to speak freely. I will never, ever step on anybody's right to speak freely. Even if I disagree, you have the right to do that.
Even when you tell me to sit down and shut up?
Did you do it?
No.
All right, then.
Well, Abraham Lincoln didn't like audits either. He was opposed to,
Yeah.
I think it was the Illinois State Bank being audited because he was involved with that, and
Yep.
Illinois Central Railroad, which was the largest in the world at the time, and he was the top guy for them, a counselor for them, and one of the richest guys, attorneys in the nation. So all the log cabin, walking 6 miles barefoot to bring a penny back stuff, you really start to wonder about it. It's the same with Henry Clay with the First National Bank. All of his friends are sitting on there as a board of trustees. So as much as this stuff is new, it's connected to the past, and it comes
Yeah.
all the way down to
Yep.
comes all the way down to Turnpike. And you have to get up and you have to fight it, or you're going to get buried. We have gotten buried.
I wanted to
Well-
get you. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the government, with this division that you're talking about, Pat, and what was on the video, the government is dividing us to such an extent, and we're so intolerant of one another that I don't want to say we're on the verge of a civil war, but that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to start a civil war
Exactly.
with white supremacists against blacks, gays against.
Right.
I can't even begin to tell you,
Right.
and I don't give a damn what you are out there. Live in your house, live the life you want to live. If you're not hurting anybody, go for it. Who cares?
That's right. We all have friends, white, black, red, male, female, all of us do. Yeah, no, that is a system to get people to fight.
It is. I
against
wanted to
each
get
other.
your opinion on that because you have the historical perspective. But what happened in Charlottesville is become sort of a classic case of a false flag operation where there was events planned. They had a counterintelligence event come to join it, and then out of that they spin the whole thing, and they make the entire thing becomes false, becomes lies, fake, but it's all propagandized to generate a result within the public, and
Right.
it's all part of a much larger plan. But I could spend like 2 hours here reading all this
It's a
stuff.
it's a Leninist plan. When they asked
Yep.
Lenin why he was successful in the Russian Revolution, he said it was primarily through the control of information and propaganda, and secondly the timidity of his opponents, and then thirdly the discontinuity or disorganization of his opponents, and then some would say the enthusiasm of Young. But this stuff here that you see is all typically socialist, communist type activity. I mentioned the Spanish Civil War from 36 to 39, which is it's a shattering of leftist idealism for a lot of people. And what you would find in that is you find both communist and anarchist elements, just like Antifa. And then ultimately what you see is the communist side would turn on what was called the POUM, which are the anarchists, and start to annihilate them. And people like George Orwell would look at this and say, hey, we weren't supposed to be doing this. We're supposed to be trying to build a better Spain. Say, that's not really what it's all about. You know, another example would be like the Vietnam War. After the fall of Saigon, you had tremendous North Vietnamese soldiers, one of the toughest enemies that we ever fought, and some of their very best people that actually thought they were fighting for a unified Vietnam found out that the Communist Party, it was really all about them. And those people were murdered.
Yeah.
Their very best people were murdered. Their very best soldiers were murdered. You rarely hear that, but that's how those systems operate.
But
so.
that's the same thing that will happen for the minions that are running the false flag agendas here.
Absolutely.
They'll be terminated when they're through using them.
Useful idiots.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely,
So this is a good model because in Charlottesville, you had these white supremacist types that wanted to do a rally. They got their permit. They shut their permit down, so they went to the courts and said, hey, we deserve to be able to. The court said, yeah, you deserve your permit. So then they gave them the permit to come and do it. Now, here's the most interesting thing that I find about it is that these guys started coming in, but these other groups had shown up, and the cops started bringing them in, and then immediately before they could even get to where they were going to speak at their rally, the cops declared a state of emergency. We're going to shut it down because something had happened, and it wasn't the car wreck yet. But they started throwing things, and I think somebody had acid thrown in their eyes and is currently blind right now. They were throwing things, and they were trying to stop the speaker from speaking. But what the police did, and this is unconscionable, they took all the white supremacist folks, and they started pushing them out of the park right into the hands of the Antifa and all that stuff, specifically to create violence and to create a scene. So it's
an act of treason. If it's destabilizing
really
the nation intentionally, it's an act
First
of treason.
First of all, and they left them, abandoned them, so they stood down. They put them all together, then they stood down and left them to fend for themselves.
I'm sure you have these guys that are white supremacists that are idiots that nobody wants any part of, but I don't think that that's 100% of what you had there. I think you have people there that simply are aware of what the actual history of the South is, the Civil War, and the fact that
they were protesting.
96% of those people, those men that fought in the Civil War, had no slaves. There were Southerners that were opposed to slavery.
Right.
There are many of them that they were hurt by slavery,
Yep.
and saw it as an institution that would eventually die out. So, but I say the ones that are there simply, I'm white and I should be on top, and it just nobody wants any part of them. But I don't think that that's all of what that was.
No, they were there.
They're desecrating the entire history of what is regarded as the Army of Northern Virginia is studied by all of the armies of the world. The 7 Days battle and what those guys achieved is totally amazing if you study those the actual military battles and tactics.
And you can't erase.
I've seen some of these guys run 35 or 40 miles barefoot and engage in a whole battle in 100-degree heat, and then regroup, and they do the same thing the next day, just nonstop. It's phenomenal. So I mean, what do you do? You think that's Larry the Cable Guy? It's not. It's really not. But Hollywood has produced that, though. I mean, think of any movie about the South, and every Southerner is like that. It's like, I'm going down my go down to see if I can see Daisy Dukes buffing out the hood on the General Lee. Everybody's like that, supposedly. There's probably one movie where they made a Southerner look good, and that was To Kill a Mockingbird, Gregory Peck. Everything else is the same stereotype, and all it does is it keeps gas on black-white relations to try to get people to be at each other's throats. And it doesn't benefit us, as the average white man or the average black person, but it keeps these guys, the establishment, in power.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, but you can't erase the slavery that we had here in America.
Horrible. And
have the slavery that the Egyptians had, the Romans had, the Greeks, all of them. They all had slaves. Anytime somebody can, what's the word I'm looking for? Dominate, for lack of a better word, someone else, they will. If it's in their makeup, they will. And it's got nothing to do with your skin color. It's got everything to do with, I can take advantage of you. I can exploit you.
What I was saying early on is that Lincoln had an agenda, and that was to start a war to bring in a new system and consolidate power for northern manufacturing elites. And he was a guy that could speak out of both sides of his face like nobody's business. He's very glib of tongue. And this idea that it was just a humanitarian type thing on his part is absolutely ludicrous. And in fact, I say the sentiment in the North was the same. You had as much prejudice, if not more. And the proof of that is, if you look at the Emancipation Proclamation, the day that that came out, you had almost 200,000 desertions in the Union Army. You had another 120,000 men that were registered, refused to register, that were ready to be registered, and some 90,000 go into Canada. So it's, if you want to read a good book, it's The Real Lincoln by Thomas D. Lorenzo. And that guy he's an economic historian, and it will change a lot of the views that were kind of driven into your head from the time that you're a kid, is that Lincoln's great, he saved the nation. As he said, he saved the Union. Yeah, it's no longer an association of voluntary states cooperating together. They are forced together, and the power is coming largely from Washington. And the whole period of the Civil War after that, if you look at what was done in the South, it's really horrific. The amount of theft, property theft, and
Still going on
political
today.
corruption is
Yep.
unbelievable.
Still
Through taxation, the theft
Yep.
of property is amazing. Totally amazing.
It's still going on today, Pat. I don't know.
Sure it is. Agenda 21, same type of thing,
Yeah.
you know? And then the brainwashing of the kids. Same thing through these schools now with the Agenda 21. All you see is all this stuff with Mother Nature and this and that, and the kids are on a nature hike, and it's, they're like the German Wandervogel in the 1920s, and later on they become the Wehrmacht and the SS. It's like,
So,
it's a biocentric system that they're teaching them that nature is above everything, so the human being is now reduced in stature and in importance.
Yeah.
So it's easier for the state to come in and say, hey, we have to do this to him, her, to him,
So Dr. Steve Pachenik is saying that it was successful in being able to designed as a agitation propaganda operation
Right.
to allow the mainstream media to now associate all the Trump supporters as white nationalists and
then shut
white
down any type of future meeting so that you can't get the information out. It's all about information, but it's about breaking the spell, because people are conditioned and they stay in a trance state. Anybody that dealt with the history of the Soviet Union, Alexander Nekrich, any of the former historians that you had, Heller, they'll talk about the trance-like state that Russians were put in from years and years of constant propaganda, just with the Soviet system trying to rationalize the irrational, and the huge effect it had on. Even Solzhenitsyn mentions that. He said, you can be the smartest guy in the world, and if you're subjected to that day in and day out, it has an effect on you. It's going to affect you.
So it also came out in the news that there are, well, let me just read this. Charlottesville confirmed agitprop staged event. The social engineers have successfully caused great division in America. The Charlottesville event was a planned agitprop or agitation propaganda designed to stir up the populace and turn us against each other so the deep state can enter and take us all down. And it has also come out now that many of the people there were being paid $25 an hour. There was Craigslist ads for $25 an hour to do this sort of stuff, to go in and be the rebels.
They have a whole organization that crowds to order, or whatever it is, like Toys R Us, or it's crowds to order.
Right.
Whatever your event is going to be, we'll supply them, and we'll give them the...
We'll supply your protesters or your
Hey,
sisters.
Mr. Trump has got to go. No, Trump, no way. He cannot be the president today. No way. No Trump. Boom, 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 boom. Sad. Oh my God.
Well,
Where do they get these guys from?
The funny thing is, though, I didn't like Obama, I didn't like Bush, and I didn't like Clinton. All three of them were traitors, and they should have been impeached, as far as I'm concerned. But I was hopeful that they would do the right thing when they were in office. I didn't stand protesting, and I probably should have. But you got to support the guy that's in office. He won a popular election, or the popular, not the popular vote, the electoral college, whatever you want to call it. He's our president. So
Depending upon what he does, you got to support him.
One of the police
He
officers.
starts to deviate from what he said he's going to do. I'm not going to support
well,
him.
that's my point, though, Pat. The last three presidents did deviate from what we wanted.
Oh, my, they've never. It's
Real quick, one of the police
Lincoln,
officers, one of the police officers down in Charlottesville has come out and started talking. Charlottesville was an inside job to ignite race war. A Charlottesville police officer has come forward to express his anger at being told to stand down by the city mayor during violent clashes between protesters. He also claims the protests, which pitched white supremacists against members of Antifa, were set up to further the agenda of the elites. We, the Charlottesville police, were ordered to bring the rival groups together. As soon as they were in contact with each other, we were told to stand down. It was outrageous. We weren't allowed to arrest anyone without asking the mayor first. We weren't even allowed to stop the driver as he sped away.
Yep.
The event was being set up as far back as at least May, and it went down like clockwork. Michael Singer, the mayor of Charlottesville, ordered police to stand down during the most chaotic and destructive periods of the protest, despite police protests against the orders. We want to do our job and keep the peace, but these mother effers in charge really want to destroy America. The Fox News reporter Doug McKay was on the scene in Charlottesville, and he backs up the police officer's claims. So I could read on, but
No, I
we're getting
want
out of time.
to
There
make
you go.
a
It's
comment
the
real
rule of
quick.
law. There's no law. They're doing what they want.
There's no law, but here's the thing,
It's
Pat.
unbelievable.
You had 5 or 6 police killed over the weekend across the country. The government is the one who's putting you at risk, and if it's your mayor, the chief of police, they're telling you to do something that isn't lawful or isn't right, you're a man, you have a mind, don't do it. And if it means your job, sue your boss. These people are putting, it's not the general public, it's not us putting you at risk, it's the government that's putting you at risk. They're using you for something you shouldn't be doing. Your job, by the way, is to protect the people, the rights of the people, and you're getting paid by the people to do that job, not by the mayor. The mayor's also getting paid, or the chief.
Yep.
And I know it's difficult to do, and I have no way of proving this to you, but when I was in uniform, I didn't let these clowns tell me what to do. If it was against the law or if it was wrong, I told them to go to hell, and I got suspended for it. Too bad. Once I got fired, that didn't lasted 5 days. Then I went back to work because they knew I was in the right. The point I'm trying to make, guys, is the government is putting you at risk. You guys out there with the badges and the guns, I'm not putting you at risk. Pat isn't, Dean isn't, and the people listening. It's the government that is corrupt that's putting you at risk. I don't want to see any of you guys hurt. You're there to protect us. We need you, but you got to do the right thing too.
That's a bad thing with those guys standing down like that.
That's horrible. Yep.
That's horrible.
It's
All
putting
right.
them at risk.
It's great that it's all coming out into the open, and this soon afterwards. They used to run these operations and get away with it for months and years, and then the truth would come out. But now it's coming out fast due to modern technology.
One
We are
thing-
out of time. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, please share this, even with people who think you're crazy. Thank you.
Thank you for watching us. You guys tune in next week, and this is Inform New Hampshire. Have a great week.
Thank you to Pat Murphy.
Thank you, Pat Murphy, coming in.